what conclusions did you draw from the 40% challenge? I was curious, were you able to reach the 40% target for the area that we were looking at?
I think I did, and the lessons learned there, and I think the key to long-term success is backyards. There's less pressure in backyards. Number one, you have the combined rooting area of multiple backyards, of adjacent backyards, allowing the trees that have the potential to grow large, and therefore achieve that canopy closure that we're really talking about. Front yards are difficult. We have setbacks under Rosalind's original or initial scenario. We had, for instance, sidewalks going in and so on. We've talked about overhead lines, service trenches, driveways, road salting. The list goes on when it comes to the front yard. Unfortunately, front yard trees have a larger human impact. You know, people walking by see them. But in terms of just pure canopy, for all those reasons, front yard trees don't grow as large, die younger. So I think key to canopy is in backyards.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. And as you say, it sounds like so backyard trees are the easier strategy to get us to the 40%. Although, and I think as you noted as well, and it was reinforced in one of the Zoom poll questions that we had, people really feel strongly that in terms of walkability and adding tree canopy to the street front, through street trees, is seen as more important than trees in people's backyards. So that's we still have a bit of a challenge ahead of us, in addition to reaching the 40%. But also adding to our walkability and the attractiveness and comfort level of those walks by having those street trees. And perhaps it means that we need to both think about what strategies, if any, you mentioned all the challenges of trees in front yards, but if there are additional strategies we can develop to try and make room for some trees, and perhaps some of that may be rethinking a little bit about some of the right-of-way and making use of city right-of-way where possible as well, to enhance tree canopy on the street where people can benefit from that. And so anyway, I would welcome people's ideas and thoughts on those subjects. A couple of specific questions I had, and just again, just to sort of to wrap up as we get close to wrapping up. Did you have any thoughts on how how we can, if there's strategies about how to get trees thriving closer to driveways and sidewalks, notwithstanding the underground service and issues and that sort of thing? Are there anything that comes to mind as we do think about how to fit trees in and amongst all the competing space, things competing for space?
I think that's the key there is competition. So the simple answer to that is to get rid of grass, which competes against trees, and this was talked about in for different reasons, but earlier, and replacing that with mulch or mulch planting beds. So you're emulating a forest situation where you have a humus layer, that mulch layer, preferably without landscape fabric between the soil and the mulch. But you're taking away that grass, which is an unnatural surface beneath trees, obviously. And like I said earlier, and you mentioned, a competing surface. So you put mulch down, your trees will do a lot better. They'll resist all the issues, drought, not road salt to such extent. That's unfortunately too often a problem under any surface, but in terms of limited rooting area, the sidewalk driveway scenario, and of course there'll be foundations and service trenches and everything else in the proximity. If you can optimize the entire soil profile for root growth, your tree will obviously do better. And to do that, you'll strip off the grass and literally put down a composted wood chip mulch in its place, and this is you're taking it off and putting down mulch almost simultaneously. You don't want that exposed surface soil to dry out. So that's the one easiest thing people can do, and this is for newly planted trees and mature trees, is to mulch in place of turf.
Interesting. Well, that's seems like a very simple strategy. So that's great to hear. Oh, someone's saying don't over mulch though, so we'll keep that in mind as well.
Yeah.
Yep. That's great. And are there any other, obviously you've been listening to the whole discussion this morning. Are there any other particular takeaways that you have, or any other ideas or big ideas that you'd like to reinforce, I guess, as part of our conclusion here?
Other than that, with the new bylaw that Paul and I in particular were talking about, the city certainly seems to be listening to groups like this. There's a sea change compared to the previous bylaw and this bylaw in terms of how the city reacts to it. As I mentioned, just the amount of feedback I get on my reports, and of course I did them under the previous bylaw as well. And the city's just ramped up their game by various magnitudes in terms of their reaction to this bylaw. And I can only assume it's as a result of feedback from people like yourselves.
Yeah, great. And then one last question that I had, and Rosalind had mentioned, I think that you have some mediation background as part of your toolkit as well. So I don't know if this is mediation, it falls in the camp of mediation or what, but I wanted to ask you what your sense of the role that community initiatives can play in enhancing tree canopy. You mentioned sort of one of advocacy just now and saying in pushing for the things we want, but what do you see and do you have any can you point to any specific examples that you may have been involved in or aware of where communities and took on more of a collective role in trying to advocate for strategies and that sort of thing?
Oh, I'm sure most people are aware of Daniel Buckles and Heather Pearl and the wonderful work they're doing, and that's
yep.
Wouldn't that be a lovely blueprint for the rest of the city to have a group like that in terms of the Champlain Oaks and taking those trees and wherever you are in that neighborhood, their names come up in relation to trees in general, but the oaks in particular. But a great example, and if that were done citywide, I can guarantee you there'd be a lot more mature trees around.
Terrific. Great. Well, thank you very much.